are in alphabetical order: Edmundo Cázares López, Douglas Fisher, Wesley Correa, and Hernán Arcidiácono. Wesley and Hernán will be presenting this proposal. I was going to organize based on the World Cup winners, but I didn't know where I was going to place Wesley.
Tenemos la propuesta.
A mi mamá le encantaría ver a su hermoso hijo en pantalla.
Mientras tanto pueden bailar si quieren, no sé. Bailen. No sé. Ahí. Bueno, mientras ponen la propuesta, yo quería hacer...
In the meantime, I would like to make a comment. The chairs who check the consensus from you don't take into account what other RIRs have. So if there is a proposal, a policy proposal in another RIR, we are separate RIR. We have our own policies. So if you wish to present a policy proposal, we don't base ourselves on what other RIRs do. So there we are. Thank you. Let us now introduce the first proposal of the proposal LAC-2025-5, which is the sub-assignment of IPv4 to third parties. What was the idea of this proposal? First of all, this was to understand what was the community perceiving regarding this problem and to translate this and solutions of the community to this problem. We know that leasing is not the best option. We are aware of that. And we aren't in favor of this. However, we know that it is essential to regularize this issue. Many ISPs are using resources from third parties without documentation, without traceability. So it's important to regularize this because otherwise we have effects that are not so desirable. We're also aware that unfortunately it's not possible to encompass every single point or every single scenario, because this would make this a very complex proposal and would pose difficulties to regulating this issue. So the idea of this proposal is to propose a mechanism to promote regularizing those who wish to comply or be up to date with the current policies. This text seeks to facilitate access of the small ISPs that don't have IPv4 addresses yet to have access to such resources in the region without the need to look for these outside and avoid all the geolocation issues that many of you already are aware of. We also think that the adoption of this policy will bring tangible benefits to the community. These include transparency, because we want all these should be registered in WHOIS. So transparency, sub-assignments to third parties would be registered in WHOIS. This would also provide traceability through a public log of movements, of sub-assignments, and of returns. Also, security is a point because we'll be providing a formal framework in policies in the policy manual of LACNIC. So all those who are outside the rules would be following and complying with the proposals. And another point is to prevent speculation, because if you open up the possibility, we know that there could be speculation when you sub-assign or transform these, definitely in order to reassign these to third parties. So here we put an initial 3-year period between final transfers to an entity, and that these final transfers can then be sub-assigned to a third party. The way we are implementing this is modifying item 0.9 that doesn't allow sub-assignments unless there is an infrastructure involved. So we changed part of this point where we maintain the part that doesn't allow sub-assignments to third parties outside the infrastructure itself, save for those that end in 23219. 23219 incorporates these requirements. The requirements are in LACNIC's website and also in the mailing list. We have a topic that was discussed intensively by the community regarding the maximum size to limit this to a /21. All the things that were discussed were in policy list discussion. Then also so important so that the transfer, so that the sub-assignment is done to those who really need it. So we have to verify this need of for using it.
The responsibility of the organizations will have to prove that responsibility and traceability through the public movement log. Everyone will be able to see in the log the blocks that are being sub-assigned to third parties, and when these are returned to the source or to the main party. And 239.5 blocks that are transferred under that sub-assignment or recovered resources might not be assigned again for a period of 3 years after they are received. As Wesley explained, in the first place, the authors got together, we discussed. It was quite hard to agree, to be honest, but then we decided to submit it to the list. And here, well, some of you might see in these bullets your comments reflected. Some of them we adopted them in full, others not in full because we didn't agree, and in others we just adapted them in trying to comply what we were requested. From 5 to 3 years is one of the changes, changes in term. We did not have the /21. We didn't think it was necessary to have a limit, but it was suggested in the list. We've also adopted the requirement to have IPv4 assigned because we found certain positions towards the policy as some might consider that could go against IPv6 deployment. We do not think that is the case, but we decided to include this bullet as well. We've not included references to legacy resources. That is also a valid comment. That it was not necessarily, it is clear that legacy are not part of these policies. And finally, we have the justification. We modify the justification mechanism as a result of an internal discussion, not as a result of the comments in the list. Thank you, Hernan, Wesley. We will now start the discussion. No, sorry, Franco with the impact assessment. For this proposal, just 5 minutes. I will present the impact assessment by LACNIC staff. Okay. The first place, the text in point 232.192c is consistent with the requirements in place for the initial and additional allocation, where we must justify the need of 25% for immediate use and plans to be used for 50% in a period of 12 months. The proposal applies the same criteria. In the second place, we believe that according to the spirit of the proposal, a block that's received by an organization as a sub-assignment of IPv4 resources to third parties might not be in turn be sub-assigned partially or in full by the recipient under that same modality. As a recommendation, we ask authors to ratify in the Public Policy Forum if what we have interpreted under point 2 in staff comments is correct. And finally, if the approval is accepted, we would require the implementation of the law and several adjustments on my LACNIC and other systems. If we can show the presentation again on screen, Wesley's slides.
Bueno, simplemente acá ante el comentario del ACNIC.
So we ratify LACNIC staff interpretation. Thank you, Hernan. Okay, we will start the discussion. There's a microphone in the room and also for the people on Zoom. Fernando? I understand the premise and I acknowledge the difficulties by small suppliers to become competitive and increase their client base. This type of proposal can open doors for something quite controversial like leasing, and it should be restricted and not accessible to those who have a minimum IPv4 and they can resolve it somewhere otherwise rather than using this mechanism. But the proposal is well structured with good restrictions to prevent abuse, and I congratulate the authors because they paid attention to all of the detail. The main point that I think it's important in Jordi's proposal and the list, there is a maximum limit of IPs that can be transferred in this proposal, and this is important to make sure that small vendors are protected, small vendors that need to prioritize. Item B speaks about a maximum of /21, but I think that it should be for blocks that are transferred under that proposal, but I think that we need to consider what the ISP already has in place. If the ISP doesn't have anything or they already have a /22, they could receive a /21 or /22 at most. So an ISP that already has a /20 would not be eligible for this proposal. I think that should be clarified because this proposal could be open for interpretation that they could transfer a /21 regardless of what they have. And something that could be added to this text is that we can include a mechanism similar to Jordi's proposal, something that would prevent speculation and deter the donor from these resources from receiving more resources, as if they have donated, they probably do not need any more. Thank you for those comments. We had evaluated some of these comments internally, especially when it comes to restricting the size. We didn't think it would have a big impact on the proposal. We don't think that too many large ISPs would request third-party allocations because they have already many blocks, and this could restrict the proposal from reaching consensus by solving the problem that we had before. But this is something that we will consider. I don't know if you already added this comment to the list, and thank you for your comment. Name, organization, David from Telemas. I'm in favor of the proposal. I am late to IPv4, and it's been very hard for us to solve these problems. So the anti-speculation mechanism, who manages it? Who would monitor it? The anti-speculation mechanism would be put in place by LACNIC systems. It is part of the features of the My LACNIC portal. So it would be in the hands of LACNIC staff using internal systems. Iván Morales, Bit Guatemala, I agree with the proposal. As mentioned before, I think there's a large number of institutions that do not have access to IP, and they're fighting with 2, 3, 4 IPs that are provided by their vendor. But other things are of utmost concern. I know of institutions that are making permanent transfers of their LACNIC resources to other RIRs, because under other RIRs they can lease their IP. So LACNIC is losing IPs because they're not providing a solution. That is a very important concern. And there are institutions, for example, in Guatemala, there's a university, they have Class B, they cannot lease, they cannot lend it, they cannot sublet it, they can't do anything because there's no mechanism, but they don't want to lose the IP. So there are 256 Class C that could benefit our country but cannot be used because there's no mechanism to do so in place. So I think it's very positive that we find a solution. Maybe we need to make some changes to some maybe wording of the text, but we need to find a solution to those 3 problems, and there could be more. Thank you, Ivan, for your comment. Actually, what we're saying about blocks leaving our region, going to other RIRs to be sublet or to be leased in our region. So that sub-allocation can only be done to entities within the region, and the entity needs to be an autonomous system and also to have an IPv6 LACNIC assignment. So once the policy is ratified and in the manual, these sub-assignments would not be allowed to entities outside our region or belonging to other RIRs. Jaime Cruz from Pit, Mexico. I agree with the proposal, and I would like to mention, with regards to the minimum and the maximum, I think that a /22 would be a better option, equivalent to what was assigned to the ISPs when the maximum was a /22. So the proposal right now is /22, but I would suggest right now it has a /21. I would suggest a /22. A question: an organization that receives this allocation from a certain ISP and they receive this first, could they receive a second transfer from a different ISP? I would suggest that they are only allowed to receive one transfer or allocation. With regards to /22 or /21, well, that's what we sort of decided on based on the comments of the list. We know there's an opportunity for improvement, but right now we've not been able to solve the problem, and we know that we could enhance it in the future, and maybe what is perfect is the enemy of what is good, but we could consider more comments in the future. Then with regards to the question of someone being able to receive to transfer, yes, the policy states that yes, there are no restrictions. Franco, we have one comment in the chat.
Hablo en portugués.
I'm going to read this in Portuguese. As already commented in the policy list, this proposed D requires being further stressed. So it is important to sign a commitment with specifying the responsibilities clearly for reserving the VIP blocks. It's just only with that responsibility can we really contribute to the small ISPs. And this would imply not dipping IPv4. Having an attribution of an IPv6 block does not necessarily imply a real commitment for using this. Many organizations request IPv6 only to respond to a formal requirement, as would be the case with this proposal, without implementing this, in fact, in their networks or services. We need to have a policy that really contributes to the future of the internet in the region. The way it is presented, I am against. Thank you. Thank you for your comment, Henry, and I value all the points that you share on the list regarding this point. But I want to clarify a couple of points that are not so clear. Any ISP today, and I think that the majority of you are operators that have an IPv4 block to preserve the IPv4 are aware that it is far more expensive to have a CGNAT, a block, and so on. So what I see is that all those who are going to be considered in this policy proposal only need what is sufficient to survive, and all the efforts made by LACNIC in past years regarding migration, implementation, and growth of IPv6 take us to this standpoint. Those who are using IPv6 will continue to use IPv6, and they just need a little IPv4 to survive. But the reality is that we need to regularize this as well, because somehow or other this is already happening irregularly, and this doesn't solve the problem. So I think that all of them go in this direction towards IPv6. This proposal is considering that the smaller ones can obtain something in order to survive together with IPv6. In addition to that, those who are not doing this totally irregularly, leasing this from legacy resources, coexist with the problem. We saw the list yesterday and the day before yesterday's of some who have problems which are the ones we wish to eliminate. Jordi Palette, one of the things that I think is missing in this proposal is whether these can be leased to entities that are not in the region, because even if you request IPv6 or from LACNIC and these should not be requested, does that mean that these could not be used, resources could not be leased outside the region? We are allowing these sub-assignments both within the region and outside the region. This implies having a leak of resources, because the resources in this region will be leased at a lower price compared to other regions. On the other hand, this interpretation made by the staff of something that is a text does not exist, and something that I don't understand. This means that whenever we discuss a policy in the forum or in the mailing list prior to the forum, then we do the impact analysis where this text does not exist, but if you can clarify this, we will do so. But this is contrary to the PDP. In other words, this implies that what is being clarified is non-existent. So these sub-assignments can be to third parties and other third parties and so on, because there's no limitation established in the text. This is very clear. The other thing would be to appeal this if this was ratified by the board. On the other hand, the inconsistency of requesting this use for 1 year, however, the leases can be for a shorter period. So here, there are contradictions in the text that I think is not very logical to reach consensus on a proposal such as this. But I do agree with this. The discussions over the past 2 years in the list say things that are opposed to what is being proposed in the list. So I disagree with this proposal. Thank you. The requirements we established are those of the autonomous systems for IPv6. We think that that is sufficient. The second point is something that we shouldn't respond to. I don't know how to respond to the third point. I don't know what the contradictions are that are mentioned. So that was a comment I wanted to make regarding the second point. Maybe through the open mic we can comment to the staff your suggestion. So this is not a direct question to the authors. But we're not going to take this into account when conducting the assessment. Edwin Salazar from IXP Ecuador. I agree with this proposal. Suggestion only regarding the time. This has been modified from 5 to 3 years. I think this should be shorter period of time, because if there are scarce resources in the region, then it shouldn't be for such a long time, but should be made available in the shortest period of time possible, so others have the opportunities, other smaller ISPs might have the opportunity to have access to such resources. So this is regarding the established period. But I do support the proposal. Thank you, Edwin. So this applies to certain specific things, not to who owns the resources today. So if this were ratified and when it enters into force, those who have the resources, idle resources, and wish to come to this option, this could be done immediately. That is, if you would receive sub-assignments or transfers. This is, for example, you receive something from the block in the waiting list, and you end up using it to lease it to a third party. So this is what we want to prevent. The rest occurs immediately. Douglas? I'm Douglas from MSM. I'm a co-author of this proposal. I'd like to add on that the main reason for my colleagues is to prevent evading such resources would occur from transferring resources from here to RIPE and then returned to our region. That is for me the most important point. As regards the point that we won't be covering every single case, it's very difficult to draft a proposal. But we try not to mention leasing and see if we can have to change the policies, the text as little as possible. But somehow that is the most interesting point of the proposal. For me, it was very difficult to accept that I couldn't add things. So I ask you to understand that and to support this proposal, because we need to put an end to this problem of spoofing that is not tracked. So we did make a call in the list. We collected the contributions of the members of the community. So here we try to reflect the wish of the community through a working group and through the community. So what we have here is not a proposal made by Hernan, Wesley, Edmundo, and myself. This is to reflect what the community stated they wished, and based on what we read in the mailing list. Hernan? Fernando, yes, I'd like to thank the author, but I also want to congratulate the authors on the methodology they used to present this proposal. They represent different countries that are benchmarks, and this is a proposal that has consensus. And I suggest that the future proposals should be produced in the same way. There is like a prior consensus prior to presenting a proposal, because you present something that is more mature and sort of well thought through. I want to congratulate you on that methodology. I hope this is replicated in the future. As regards this proposal, I am in favor of this proposal. The position of Cabase in this case is that we are the voice of all the small and medium-sized ISPs that are not in this room today because they lack resources. Those who are here, those who have resources and are part of LACNIC. And we carry this voice to those who do not participate. Let me highlight something from the proposal. They have to have their ASN and the small block of IPv6 as not to be outside the deployment of IPv6, but also to force all these small internet providers to be part of our community. I think this is a very valid requirement that was not in the previous proposal of having ASN IPv6. So I strongly support this proposal. Thank you, Fernando. We have 2 more questions in the room, and we will then close the microphone. One more. Norberto? 3 more, and we close the microphone. Nicolas Antoniello. I want to... Nicolas Antoniello, speaking on a personal note. I was going to make a couple of comments, which I will leave for the end. I think these can be improved, in my opinion. But prior to that, I want to clarify 2 things that were mentioned by Jordi, and I thought of these first, namely the risk that the resources leave the region is not such, because these resources and the policy proposal, the current policy proposal, if I'm not mistaken, means that you have to be a LACNIC member. To be a LACNIC member, you have to be in the region, and that solves the issue. So there's no way of the issues leaving the region. Second, the point on the fact that assignment should be less than 1 year. This can be easily solved, adding that 50% is within 1 year, 50% in a period no longer than 1 year. If you ask it for 3 months, so that solves it. So those 2 suggest for improvements. 1, I agree with the minimum assignment of /24. I wasn't totally persuaded that there should be a maximum block size for the sub-assignment. And then the mechanism to avoid speculation states that only 2 points of the PDP are mentioned, of the policy manual, that cannot be sub-assigned once you have received this for a 3-year period. So what I would suggest is to modify that. These are not the only 2 cases of sub-assignments that we have. If I requested an assignment of addresses for critical resources, this is not contemplated in these 2 points. It means that they could assign this. What I suggest is to include something like save of what is specified in the other region section. None of these can be sub-assigned for a period less than 3 years. That would cover all the cases. Regarding your first comment, somehow, and I'm in favor of the policy, I forgot to mention that. The first comment that you made is that we hadn't included a maximum size, but it was the consensus of the list before we prepared the proposal. So we decided to incorporate it. Jordi, I think you didn't hear this, but we closed the microphone after Norberto. If you want to add something, we ask you to please send it to the mailing list. You were speaking with Ariel. I apologize.
Okay, we'll continue here in the middle, and Norberto is the last. Good morning, Juan Carlos Marcos from Cabase. I want to thank the commitment of the authors of the proposal, because I believe that this problem has been a pain in our necks for many years, for a long time. I agree with the proposal, but the main justification, and let me put my glasses on so I can read it. We are aware that we cannot cover all potential scenarios. Therefore, we propose a mechanism that promotes regularization of those that want to comply with the policies. And I want to stop here, because as a community, I think that we have the chance to help of those who want to do things well. I'm sure we will need to make some technical adjustments, as it was mentioned here, but it's the first time that I hear a very simple, easy to understand, straight to the point proposal that really tackles the most important points. Thank you. Thank you, Juan Carlos. Just as Nico said, there might be some cases that we have not contemplated, but we wanted to have something that at least attempts to solve the problems. Then we can enhance it, but we should start from there. There's always some case that we might detect in the future, and we've missed now. And we or anybody in the community can submit a proposal to enhance it. Norberto Farias Nakbean XP. XP is fully agrees with the proposal. We are the first ones who identify this latent need. In addition to agreeing with the proposal, I call upon all members to promote this proposal. If we are looking for obstacles, the mask, the ASN, the timelines, we're not going to achieve anything. We need to start with something. If we then identify opportunities for improvement, well, these should be submitted, they should be proposed, but we need to take the first step. Otherwise, it will get us nowhere. So we have solved in other regions or in other RIRs with RIR resources that are also scarce, but we have the tools to do it at LACNIC, but sometimes we fail to do it. Thank you. Thank you, Norberto. It just reflects the spirit of our proposal. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Thank you to the authors for your presentation. So let's now gauge the room temperature. We'll ask staff to help us. And let's display the poll on Zoom. Those who agree with the proposal, please raise your hand. Keep it up for a few seconds. Keep it like that for a few seconds. Okay, you can put it down. Those who disagree with the proposal, please raise your hand and keep it up.
¿Pueden bajarlo, por favor?
You can put it down. Those who abstain, please raise your hand and keep it up. You can put it down. Okay, LAC-2025-5, sub-assignment of IPv4 resources to third parties, version 1, finishes the initial discussions on November 3rd this year. So as of that date, the chairs will inform the community whether the proposals reached consensus or not. This brings us to the end of the proposals, and we will now start the open mic session. So anyone who'd like to discuss about the proposals that have been submitted or